What would you do if you worked every single day to build a future for yourself, only to find out that someone you trusted with your whole heart had quietly been tearing it down behind your back? What would you do if you checked your credit score one morning and discovered you were nearly $100,000 in debt, for loans you never signed, for money you never touched? And what if the name on those documents was someone who sat at your Thanksgiving table every single year? Emma Calloway was 26 years old, and she had built everything she had from scratch. She grew up in a mid-sized city called Fort Wayne, Indiana. Not a glamorous place, not a place people wrote songs about, but a place where people worked hard and expected the same from their neighbors. Emma had grown up in a small brick house on the east side of town with her mom Linda, her dad who left when Emma was 9, and her uncle James, her father's older brother, who had stepped in after the divorce and become something close to a father figure in the years that followed. James Calloway was the kind of man who told great stories. He had a big laugh, a firm handshake, and the kind of confidence that made people trust him before he'd even finished a sentence. He coached Emma's soccer team when she was 12. He taught her how to drive. He sat in the front row at her college graduation and cried when she walked across the stage. Emma loved him without question. That was just the truth of it. She had studied business and real estate at Indiana University, graduated at 22, and spent the next 4 years grinding. She worked at a property management firm during the day and studied for her real estate license at night. She skipped vacations, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and cooked at home almost every night because restaurants were a luxury she hadn't yet earned. She was 26 when she finally had enough saved for a down payment on her first property, a small duplex on the north side of Fort Wayne that she planned to rent out and use as the foundation for something bigger. A real business. A real future. The kind of thing her mother never had the chance to build. She was meticulous. Organized. She kept every receipt, every bank statement, every document in color-coded folders on her laptop and a physical binder on her desk at home. She knew her credit score almost by heart. 741 years of careful spending, never a missed payment, never a single account she hadn't personally opened. She was proud of that number. It represented everything she had refused to let slide, which is exactly why, on an ordinary Wednesday morning in October, when her mortgage pre-approval came back denied, she felt the floor move beneath her. She called the bank from her car in the parking lot, voice calm, assuming it was a processing error. The loan officer on the phone was polite but direct. "Miss Calloway, your current debt-to-income ratio makes you ineligible for this loan amount. You're currently carrying approximately $94,000 in outstanding personal loans." Emma sat very still. "I'm sorry," she said. "Can you say that again?" He repeated it. "That's not possible," she said. "I don't have any personal loans. I've never taken a personal loan in my life." There was a brief pause. "Miss Calloway, I'm looking at 3 separate loan accounts opened in your name over the past 2 years. I'd recommend pulling a full credit report and contacting the lenders directly." Emma pulled the report the moment she got home. 3 loans. One for $31,000. One for $28,000. One for $35,000. All opened within an 18-month window. All with a lender called Midwest Premier Credit, a name she had never heard in her life. Her hands were shaking by the time she got to the address listed on the loan applications. It wasn't her address, but she recognized it immediately. It was Uncle James's address, the house on Birchwood Drive where she'd spent half her childhood. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table with every document spread out in front of her, going through each one with the same focus she brought to every investigation at work. Loan applications required a social security number, a date of birth, a signature, her SSN, her date of birth, her name, and a signature that was close, very close but not quite right. A little too looped on the L. A slight difference in the way the A was formed. She had looked at her own signature so many times over the years that the difference was small but undeniable. Someone had forged it. She thought about Uncle James's address on those documents. She thought about how he had always been around when she was growing up, present enough to know her social security number, present enough to have seen her sign documents over the years. She thought about the new truck he'd been driving for the past year, the renovation he'd done on his kitchen, the trip to Florida he'd taken last spring. She thought about every time he'd hugged her at family dinners and told her he was proud of her. And then she picked up the phone and called him. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, sweetheart. What's going on?" She told him she was having some issues with her credit. She kept her voice even. She said she was just trying to understand some accounts that had shown up unexpectedly. She asked if he knew anything about Midwest Premier Credit. There was a pause. Half a second too long. "Never heard of them," he said. Chloe said. "That's strange. Because the mailing address on the accounts is Birchwood Drive." Another pause. "That's weird. Might be some kind of identity theft thing. You should call the credit bureaus." "Yeah," Emma said. "I'm going to do a lot more than that." She hung up before he could respond. She gave herself 48 hours before she made her next move. She needed to be certain. Not almost certain. Not probably certain. Completely, documentably, undeniably certain. Because this was family. And if she was wrong, there was no coming back from the accusation. But if she was right and everything in her told her she needed it to be airtight. She contacted an attorney named Patricia Osei, a woman she'd met through a colleague at the real estate firm, who specialized in identity theft and financial fraud cases. She laid out everything she had, the loan documents, the forged signature, the address discrepancy, the timeline. Patricia was quiet for a moment after Emma finished. Then she said, "This is a federal offense. Whoever did this could be looking at wire fraud, identity theft, and fraudulent loan acquisition charges. This isn't small." "I know," Emma said. "Do you know who did it?" Emma paused. "I have a very strong suspicion. I need help confirming it." Patricia connected her with a forensic document examiner, who analyzed the signature on the loan applications within a week. His conclusion was clear. The signatures were forged, and based on pressure patterns and stylistic markers, they were likely produced by the same hand. Patricia also helped Emma request the original loan application documents from Midwest Premier Credit through a formal legal process. Those documents, when they arrived, included a copy of an ID used to verify the account opener. The ID was a photocopy of Emma's driver's license, and the IP address used to submit the online portions of the applications traced back to a residential address in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Birchwood Drive. Emma did not cry when she saw the final confirmation. She had already used up her tears somewhere around 3 in the morning on the second night, sitting alone in her kitchen, thinking about a 12-year-old girl who thought her uncle hung the moon. Instead, she called Patricia Osei and told her to move forward. The fraud report was filed with the Federal Trade Commission and the Indiana State Police. The documentation package, signatures, IP records, address evidence, and the forensic analysis was submitted in full. Midwest Premier Credit, once contacted by law enforcement, cooperated quickly. They had been defrauded too, and they wanted resolution. James Calloway was contacted by investigators within 3 weeks. Emma heard about it from her mother, who called her confused and upset, asking if Emma knew what was happening. Emma told her mother everything. Quietly. Carefully. Without anger, because her mother didn't deserve anger. Linda Calloway sat on the other end of the phone and cried, and Emma let her and said nothing for a long time. When her mother finally asked why James would do something like this, Emma said the only honest thing she had. "I don't know, Mom. But I think he saw someone building something and decided it was easier to take from me than to build something himself." James Calloway entered a guilty plea 4 months later. He was ordered to make full restitution, all $94,000, and sentenced to 30 months in federal prison plus 3 years of supervised probation. His assets were frozen pending the repayment process. Emma's credit report was corrected. The fraudulent accounts were removed. Her score, once the dust settled, came back stronger than it had been before. She reapplied for her mortgage pre-approval in February. This time it came back approved. She closed on the duplex on a Thursday afternoon in March, signing her name on the final documents while sitting across from a notary she didn't know in an office building downtown. She wrote her signature slowly and deliberately, each letter clear and fully her own. That evening she drove to the property alone and sat on the front steps as the sun went down over the neighborhood. The house needed work. The gutters were rusting and the front yard was more mud than grass. But it was hers. Legally, completely, undeniably hers. Nobody had given it to her. Nobody had signed for it behind her back. Nobody had built it out of her name while she wasn't looking. She had earned it. Every single dollar of it. She thought about Uncle James. She thought about the graduation where he'd cried in the front row. She thought about how long he'd been carrying whatever it was that made him capable of doing what he did, the desperation or the entitlement, or the specific kind of smallness that leads a person to steal from the people who love them. She didn't forgive him that evening. She wasn't there yet, and she wasn't going to pretend otherwise. But she made herself a quiet promise sitting on those front steps as the neighborhood settled into night. She was going to build something so solid, so documented, so completely her own that no one, not a stranger, not a family member, not anyone who smiled at her across a dinner table, would ever be able to reach into her life and take what wasn't theirs. She had worked too hard. She had come too far. And Emma Calloway was just getting started.